boyfriend, Diego, and he basically said...
That's the hot goss, guys.
I don't know if this is true. I'm just saying this is what I heard.
What's the gossip? That she was there to meet Diego?
Ew.
And maybe she had that meltdown because Diego saw her in real life and was like, "You're not the Nora that I thought you were on the internet. You catfished me. You looked like you were 21 and pretty, and you're middle-aged and fucking ugly."
Psycho.
And psycho on top of it. I was willing to accept some of your psycho, but you're not hot enough.
But only if you were younger
and hotter. Like, if you were younger and hotter, I could deal with the psycho in you, but you're a fucking middle-aged, ugly bitch, and you're too psycho for me.
You're not pretty enough for this level of insanity, madam.
That's right. Because, you know, like that...
Women gotta go to their hand. You can't overplay it. Like, you are a certain level of attractiveness, and that entitles you to feminine insanity. But you gotta know your place.
You gotta know your level, right? You know, you don't want to overplay that.
Right.
She clearly did. So this is probably on the tail of the rejection from Diego. Diego probably kicked her to the curb when he saw her in real life.
Right. She saw his wife, I assume.
His Latter King, was he Jewish?
Yeah, you know what? Maybe even she met his wife.
Probably. I think that's what happened. She suddenly realized it wasn't quite as simple as they had thought about.
No, they weren't going to be able to go wage jihad together in the streets of New York.
Oh,
without repercussions.
What would wage jihad? What does Diego do? I think he just sits in his room watching videos.
I don't know. Hi, Danny. Oh my gosh, look, we have Nazi 101 in the audience. It looks like a Kanye West fanboy. Can the Kanye West fanboy come up and play? Like, oh my gosh, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, how are you?
Good. Boy, I hope your skin is...
It's gay, it's not Kanye, it's CA, but I'm a big gay fan, definitely.
Oh, okay. I hope you have pearly white skin like an Aryan.
I mean, let's not go there. But I do not really support everything he says because he's been supporting Diddy a lot. So.
Whoa.
Oh, okay. But you support him enough to like put your Kanye Nazi symbol on your PTO.
Yeah, but it's not because of him only.
Oh, okay. You just like the Nazis in general. You think it's hot. I mean, I can shave my mustache. I can shave my mustache into a little into a little tiny rectangle on the top of my lip, a little soul patch, maybe the Nazi soul patch. Would you like that? Is that?
It's not that. It's still like Jewish people. That's it.
Is it called like a toothbrush mustache?
I don't like.
Is that what it's called?
It's like a half mustache. It's weird, man. I don't really care about his mustache, honestly. It's not even about it. It's not even about that. It's just I don't like Jews. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I appreciate the honesty.
Okay. So
Nazi. It's refreshing, isn't it?
Okay, Hitler originally wore a traditional handlebar style of mustache, otherwise known as the Kaiser. But during World War I, was ordered to trim it so his gas mask would fit properly. So naturally, he trimmed it to the relatively popular toothbrush style, which was apparently introduced to Germany from the U.S. in the late 19th century. So they were copying us.
It's kind of irrelevant, honestly. Let's just stay on topic.
Oh, okay. So they just stay on the hating the Jews part of it. She just wants to stick and focus on hating Jews.
I just want to be clear. Name of the mustache is the toothbrush mustache.
Well, I mean, to be fair about it, as long as you hate the Jews, I mean that's probably enough Jew hating for anybody. So I probably take the other side of that, but you know that's just me.
Nazi, when you see any random Jew, do you want to kill them?
That's the thing. So I am based in Canada. I don't really see any Jews.
No, I'm saying if you see, let's say, a child, if you see like a 2-year-old, if you see a 2-year-old child walking around, do you want to stab him to death?
Fuck you guys.
Only if they're
Donald Trump
Jewish.
all the
Though.
way.
Only if they're Jewish.
Fuck you.
Only if they're Jewish.
I'm asking Nazi.
Fuck.
If you see a 2-year-old,
Fuck you. Fuck
shut
you.
up. Shut up. Nazi,
Okay, I'm
if you
gonna go down.
Nazi, if you see a 2-year-old Jewish child, do you want to kill him? Nazi. Hello.
Yeah, I guess
Doesn't
the
have
answer
enough
would
courage for
probably
that.
be yes.
No.
But
I'm sorry. I'm
she
sorry.
she
Could
said
you
they don't
please-
have Jews in Canada.
No,
They don't have
I'm
any
sorry,
Jews in
Chris.
Canada.
Right.
Can you answer my question? Nazi? Say coward. You're a coward.
No, she said it. She said that she got a call. I think Adolf
Right,
might
she
have
apologizes
given her a
to the
phone call.
inconvenience of everyone
the other
listening,
side.
but she has a call. She just wanted to politely let everyone
It's very
know
important.
it's not out of rudeness or disrespect to anyone listening. The Nazi is simply taking a phone call. We apologize.
Aquarius, brother. I just need to ask something.
Sure, we don't mind interrupting.
Is Nazi a girl? Is Nazi a girl or a boy?
Well, I mean, it's. I want to be very careful not to misgender her because, or him, her, he, him, her, she. I don't know. I don't want to misgender that individual because sometimes someone with a feminine sound like this Nazi here might actually be a he, him. This is 2025. So just please be sensitive and don't misgender the Nazi.
Okay, Nazi, so the Nazi's a girl. Just wanted to confirm that. It's fine. I'm gonna go now.
Okay, all right. Well,
Because
it would be appropriate. It would be appropriate to use maybe we could use pronouns like shit head for the Nazi. Like that would probably be acceptable because that covers multi-genders of Nazis.
Yeah, I think Nazi's not gonna speak if I'm here, so I'm gonna go now. Guys, take care.
Okay, goodbye.
Have a good day.
Why does she care if you're here or not? What did you?
Yeah, that's the point. She won't speak. I'm telling you, because we haven't spoke to each other, but we have added each other. She knows me.
The Nazi doesn't give a shit about you. I hate to break it to you.
Can you please check the chats, room chat? Can you please check that?
No,
She wants
no, I don't check the chat. She can say whatever she wants.
Okay, okay, let's see. I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be on mute.
It just exposes the Nazi, to be fair about it. I think that what's important to know is that the freedom in which this Nazi has in her fingertips to put this fucking disgusting symbol on the stage has been paid for by all of us here that love freedom.
Oh.
So,
Okay.
anyway, I just
But
want to say hi to my friends that showed up in the audience. If you want to bring some, come on up. Just I don't know how it works here. Raise your hand. Kelly, Near, Marshall.
How do we pronounce your name? Yeah.
Has gotten stabbed by one of you crazy bitches. But look, that's not the point. The point is that statistically speaking, if you were the best thing in her life, Abiel, then she has nowhere to go but down. So probably by now, 6 years ago, I'm pretty sure she's probably been pimped out by some nigga. Somebody had fed her some dope or something like that. She living in some raggedy ass makeshift shack or a car or a hotel or something like that. And you know what I'm saying? She probably sits there and thinks about how her life could have been had she had stayed with you. That's if you were, handling business. I don't know.
I just remembered another big reason why I don't know if it matters, but she also, she's been in a long-term relationship trying to be my friend, and I find that a little suspicious. Maybe that's just me being skeptical, but
no, that's not skeptical. You're in the right. You're the good guy. That shit's not.
Okay, so I can tell you that was a piece of information that was left out before.
Yeah, I just remembered literally.
Every fucking time I would get mad at my ex, I would think about the ex before him.
Like if I told you,
This is Lion's
Step
point.
down.
that you
If
never
I had
actually
chosen you, no, that is not okay. So it's not dating up. My ex was an entrepreneur, and the one before him was too. I don't fuck with nasty ghetto niggers. So anyway,
I'm not a nasty ghetto nigger. How dare you? I'm a pause.
sure.
I may be a ghetto nigger, but I'm not a nasty one.
No, but it was like I made a choice, and I'm just like, you make me regret. You make me wish I had chose him.
You know what? I feel like
You still made my point. Thanks.
I feel
That's
like
not your point. You're always talking about going up because
yo,
you
Hack Up,
fight
I
in
have
the
more
fucking dirt.
information.
That
I
was
have
the
more
best that you
details
ever
about
Wait,
that.
wait, hold on.
And you're depreciating about a minute. You should go back to one of those suckers that's willing to take you back and move on.
I'm not a loser bitch who doesn't
Marshall,
know how
I'm
to
inviting you
exist in a life
but it's not
by themselves. Anyway, if Lion could stop being a ghetto piece of shit. What was that, Melissa?
I was actually going to ask Abdiel. I'm curious what Marshall's advice would be to Abdiel if he could repeat the story.
I'm trying to
What
bring them up.
story? The
Marshall's
my
already out.
coworker or
The
the
scenario,
girl that broke my
yeah.
heart? Wait, the girl that broke my heart?
No, the worker, the dilemma that you're in. I wonder what Marshall's advice would be.
I was also
Marshall,
like,
you
damn,
get it.
what would Marshall do? What the fuck?
Get it, I'm here. What's up?
All right, Marshall. Been at my job for over 10 years. Isn't yeah, I like it. They treat me well, whatever. Just giving you some context. And I've been working with this girl for like 2 years, I want to say. She's been at my job. And she wants me to take her out. I mean, we've never really been friends. I mean, the way she even worded it, she's like, "Hey, do you want to get to know me?" I was like, "Yo, I've never had a girl ask me that shit." But anyways, well, let me try to remember. Oh yeah, I just recently found out that because I don't know her that well. I only see her at work. We kill time whenever slow at work. That's how we really became cool. But yeah, I'm 32 and I found out she's 23. And what else am I missing, Melissa? Like any details?
You're trying to leave the job soon. You're
Oh yeah, I might be leaving the job soon.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think, Marshall? What should he do?
Sounds like she likes you. I would get to know her and see where that goes. Unless you
That's
are not
right.
in a place, unless you're not in a place to do that. If you're not in an emotional headspace for that, no harm, no foul. You know, like people got to be ready. But it kind of sounds like she's inviting you to get to know her because she likes you.
Oh, well, Marshall, you missed the part about how Abdiel is seemingly only interested in physical activities.
for now, you know,
I'm sorry, but the way that girl approached you, she's only interested in extracurricular physical activities. That she doesn't sound like she's
But
trying
getting to
But
know
hang on.
someone implies.
There's a difference, Callie. You're not
Hang
walking
on.
up to a guy saying you ain't trying to get to know me. Come on.
It's not like she said, I want to get to know you in the biblical sense. She said she wants to get to know you, which typically indicates somebody's interested.
That
I don't know if
indicates
it's-
split me in a
I don't know
Oh,
if
wow.
it's like a regional thing.
He's right.
Or if it's a New York City thing. But single women in New York City, I'm not saying all. Again,
That's right.
I'm not saying all. I'm not saying most. I won't even say half. Maybe just the ones I come across. Single women, they doing their thing, all right? That's the way I look at it. So,
That's the case generally in big cities. I get it, but
like I'm not trying
You're
to.
gonna be
feel
like
special
guy number.
because she
You're gonna
wants
be like
me,
guy
you know,
number 15.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm not trying to feel special because she came up to me and told me like, hey,
it's not about being special. She wants to fuck.
But remember
It's
the
possible
consequences.
she just wants to get to know you.
Yo, come on, man.
All of that is true, but remember, you have to think about you. Stop thinking with your dick and think about the consequences of even playing and moving in that direction.
yeah, Lion, turn that shit up, Lion. Gotta cut this
What's the
money.
positive?
The pussy gonna
What's the
come in.
positives? What's the positives and the negatives? So, of course, the first positive is, yes, you get the busted knife. The second positive is what? Nothing.
Well, if you get to know her, there may be positives you're not aware of.
And she's a server, right? You said it's no. She said she's a greeter.
A hostess,
right?
yeah.
A hostess. There's not much positives coming out of that.
Well, they split tips, right? They split tips. Yeah.
The reason
If he's looking for a provider, then say that.
That's what she's looking for. Exactly.
He's looking for a provider in his wife, or not?
No. So we're playing the pro and con game. Now, what's a con? What's another con that can happen from him intermingling himself with this young lady?
I don't see it as a con, maybe not yet, but like the age difference is a con, can be a big con.
Is she in school? She going to school? She got some shit going on?
No, she just she has 2 part-time jobs.
But you've known her for 2 years, right? So y'all should know some shit
Not
about
that
each
well,
other, right?
like not that well.
What's the purpose of the part-time jobs? What is she doing with the part-time jobs? Trying to supplement.
She trying to have a full-time job?
Nah, I don't really know. That's the thing, bro. I don't know her that well.
All right.
I don't know if she's still in school or she was in school.
Look, I'm just telling you now. 9 times out of 10, she's trying to get 3 incomes instead of 2. Guess which one she's trying to get?
Look, Abdiel, I asked Marshall because I feel Marshall is fairly.
You ain't wrong.
And I wanted to see what he thought you should do. So if Marshall thinks you should do it, you should do it.
And now for the ladies, have y'all ever, I'm not saying in the exact same scenario, but have y'all ever like found a older attractive man that you were willing or were interested in?
I didn't do it. When I left my husband, I had this trainer and he was, oh God. And you know how close and like touchy trainers are? But I couldn't do it. I was just like, oh my God.
Did he ever shoot the shot or not?
Of course.
Oh, okay. So he all right. You was just saying nah. Okay.
Now that's because Tally is a coward by nature. She's scared to try things. She's scared to try new things. So therefore, she's always gonna be that person just sitting on the sidelines. That's it.
So I should be a whore. I should be a whore, and then you would think more of me. Is that what you're saying, Lion?
Did you ask me to get to know you?
At least
That's some girl game. Would you like to get to know me? All right.
At least your life will be more exciting. You only have one life to live, lady.
I'm living it. But yeah, I know how I am. Honestly, my cousin and I have discussed this in depth. We have determined that the anatomy is off. My heart is where it shouldn't be. And so if you do certain things, I'm in love. Look, I'm in love. I don't know what to tell you. So I feel your pain, Abdiel, but also that's why I don't do that with just like anybody. Everyone wasn't made to be a slut.
What about Melissa?
Wait, hold on. I got to challenge this. 2024, real quick. Most exciting thing you've done the entire year. Go.
2024. Damn. I ain't do much. Just worked. I went to a few the NLCS Mets playoffs. That was pretty exciting. What else? Went to the Pocono Mountains twice in the summer and in the fall. Yeah, bro, it's been a whack year. Like, I mean, I've had fun, but nothing crazy.
Rented on YouTube. I was surprised when it cost me $5.
Oh, on YouTube. Sean, you said $5 more than you got. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was just being facetious or whatever.
And that brings up a good topic. Are you part of the lower class, Sean?
Lower class?
Are you part of the lower class?
Dude, you're cold, Christian. You're cutthroat.
Nah. I'm actually a pretty nice dude, honestly. I just love messing around.
Yeah,
You do. You roll with the punches, yeah, and I like that. It's nice.
That's you're rolling with the big boys throwing those shots. We know you're joking, but you're good.
Well, listen, I'm kind of like a snake. No one really knows when I'm gonna strike. Like I like, you know how the rattlesnake kind of like rattles when it's like kind of like angry. Like that's not how I am. I'm like one of the mysterious types. It's like you don't know when I'm going to. It's kind of just like it happens when it happens.
The pineal gland has tiny little cilia, hair-like extensions all around it. When you hold your breath and you finally let your...
Once upon a time, there was a Zen student who quoted an old Buddhist poem to his teacher, which says, "The voices of torrents are from one great tongue. The lines of the hills are the pure body of Buddha." "Isn't that right?" he said to the teacher. "It is," said the teacher, "but it's a pity to say so. It would be, of course, much better if this occasion were celebrated with no talk at all, and if I addressed you in the manner of the ancient teachers of Zen. I should hit the microphone with my fan and leave. Because Zen is a way of life, a state of being that is not possible to embrace in any concept whatsoever. So that any concepts, any ideas, any words that I shall put across to you this evening will have as their object showing you the limitations of words and of thinking. Now then, if one must try to say something about what Zen is, and I want to do this by way of introduction, I must make it emphatic that Zen, in its essence, is not a doctrine. There's nothing you're supposed to believe in. And it's not a philosophy in our sense, that is to say, a set of ideas, an intellectual net in which one tries to catch the fish of reality. Actually, the fish of reality is more like water. It always slips through the net, and in water, you know, when you get into it, there's nothing to hang on to. All this universe is like water. It is fluid, it is transient, it is changing. And when you're thrown into the water after being accustomed to living on the dry land, you're not used to the idea of swimming. You try to stand on the water, you try to catch hold of it, and as a result you drown. The only way to survive in the water, and this refers particularly to the waters of modern philosophical confusion, where God is dead, metaphysical propositions are meaningless, and there's really nothing to hang on to, because we're all just falling apart. And the only thing to do under those circumstances is to learn how to swim. And to swim, you relax. You let go, you give yourself to the water, and you have to know how to breathe in the right way. And
then you find that the water holds you up. Indeed, in a certain way, you become the water. And so in the same way, one might say, if one attempted to, again I say misleadingly, to put Zen into any sort of concept, it simply comes down to this. That in this universe there is one great energy, and we have no name for it. People have tried various names for it, like God, like Brahman, like Tao. But in the West, the word God has got so many funny associations attached to it that most of us are bored with it. When people say God the Father Almighty, most people feel funny inside. And so we like to hear new words. We like to hear about Tao, about Brahman, about Shinyo and Tathata, and such strange names from the Far East, because they don't carry the same associations of mawkish sanctimony and funny meanings from the past. And actually, some of these words that the Buddhists use for the basic energy of the world really don't mean anything at all. The word Tathata, which is translated from the Sanskrit into suchness or thusness or something like that, really means something more like dadada, based on the word tat, which in Sanskrit means that. In Sanskrit it is said tattvam asi, that thou art, or in modern American, you're it. But da, that's the first sound a baby makes when it comes into the world. Because the baby looks around and says, da, that. And fathers flatter themselves and think it's saying da, which means daddy. But according to Buddhist philosophy, all this universe is one da. That means 10,000 functions or 10,000 things, one suchness. And we're all one suchness. And that means suchness comes and goes like everything else, because this whole world is an on and off system. As the Chinese say, it's the yang and the yin. And therefore it consists of now you see it, now you don't, here you are, here you aren't. Because that's the very nature of energy, to be like waves, and waves have crests and troughs. Only, we, being under a certain kind of sleepiness or illusion, imagine that the trough is going to overcome the wave, or the crest. The yin, the dark principle, is going to overcome the yang, or the light principle. And that off is finally going to triumph over on. And we, shall I say, bug ourselves by indulging in that illusion. Gee, supposing darkness did win out, wouldn't that be terrible? And so we're constantly trembling and thinking that it may, because after all, isn't it odd that anything exists? It's most peculiar. It requires effort, it requires energy, and it would be so much easier for there to have been nothing at all. Therefore we think, well, since the is side of things is so much effort, you always give up after a while and you sink back into death. But death is just the other face of energy. And it's the rest, the not being anything around, that produces something around, just in the same way that you can't have solid without space, or space without solid. When you wake up to this, and realize that the more it changes, the more it's the same thing, as the French say, that you are really a playing of this one energy, and there is nothing else but that it is you, but that for you to be always you would be an insufferable bore. And therefore, it is arranged that you stop being you after a while, and then come back as someone else altogether. And so when you find that out, you become full energy and delight. As Blake said, energy is eternal delight. And you suddenly see through the whole sham of things. You realize you're that. We won't put a name on it. You're that. And you can't be anything else. So you are relieved of fundamental terror. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be a great hero, that you won't jump when you hear it bang, that you won't worry occasionally, that you won't lose your temper. It means, though, that fundamentally, deep, deep down within you, you will be able to be human. So it is then that, if I may put it metaphorically, Zhuangzi said, the perfect man employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing, it refuses nothing, it receives but does not keep. In other words, this is to be, put it very strictly into our modern idiom, this is to live without hang-ups. That is to say, to be able to drift like a cloud and flow like water. Seeing that all life is a magnificent illusion, a playing of energy, and there is absolutely nothing fundamentally to be afraid of. If you were told that you were going to be given half an hour's interview with God, and you had the privilege of asking one question, I wonder what you would ask. You might be given some preparation too. Because when you think, what is your ultimate question, you'll probably do many things before you arrive at it. And I know many people would discover that they had no question to ask. The situation would be altogether too overwhelming. But many people to whom I've put this problem say that the question that they would ask is, who am I? And that is something we know very little about. Because whatever it is that we call I is too close for inspection. It's like trying to bite your own teeth.
It's just
or to touch the tip of your finger
oh,
with the
that's
tip of the
the
same
Brophy.
finger.
Yo, Brophy man, are you there?
And although other people can tell you who you are and do, they only see you from the outside, as you see them from the outside. And you don't see from the inside. And so the nature of what it is that we call I is extremely puzzling, because there is some confusion as to how much of us is I. We talk in ordinary ways about my body, my feet, and when we go to the dentist to have our teeth fixed, We regard him rather as a mechanic. Like you take your car to the garage, so you take your body to the surgeon or the dentist or whatever it is to be fixed, have the parts changed or something of that kind. And they're really getting to work on that now. And so the question is, when somebody has a heart transplant, that sounds very radical because we say, in my heart of hearts. But nowadays, most of us seem to feel that whatever it is that I is located in the head. Somewhere behind the eyes and between the ears is the center. And the rest of us is an appendage, a vehicle, which carries the self around. Now, popular speech also reflects the sensation that I am very different from what we call the other. Other people, other things, anything that we can become aware of is sort of other. There is an opposition, apparently, between the knower and the known. And so we talk about facing reality. We talk about coming into this world as if somehow we didn't belong. As if instead of being leaves growing out of a tree, we were a lot of birds that had alighted on bare branches. And it has become common sense for most people living in the 20th century today to adopt the 19th century philosophy of science, which interprets the physical universe outside human bodies as being a mechanical contraption, which is essentially stupid, unfeeling, automatic, composed of mainly geological elements, rocks, gases, and so forth. And therefore we feel rather alone and left out of this thing, in contrast with the ideas of Ptolemaic astronomy. Instead of being at the center of the universe, we are on the outer limits of a minor galaxy, revolving around an unimportant star on a small, minute ball of rock. And therefore, that astronomical way of looking at things is simply overwhelming. It makes us feel not only of no importance, but also very much left out. And as a result, that is the common sense of most people living today. We did, of course, have a religious view of our nature, that we were the children of a loving God who is in charge of this whole operation. But very few people actually believe that anymore. A great many people think they ought to believe in it, and would like to believe in it, but they don't. Most ministers that I know don't believe it, but they feel guilty about this because they feel they ought to. But it became implausible. There never was a serious argument against it. It simply became unthinkable in comparison with the dimensions of the universe as we now see it. So having lost a way of looking at the world, an image of the world which gave us some sense of meaning, we now have an image of the world which gives us none at all. And so we feel rather inclined to put up a fight against the whole show. Interestingly enough, when in the 19th century we switched our common sense from supernaturalism to naturalism, one would think that a naturalist would be a person who loved nature, just as a materialist ought to be a person who loves material, but certainly isn't. With what is called the philosophy of scientific naturalism, naturalism is used in a negative way. It has nothing to do with being natural. It has something to do with being not supernatural, merely natural. And all sorts of phrases were coined in that epoch, which I would call put-down phrases. Freud spoke of the basic psychic energy as libido, which means blind lust. People like Ernst Haeckel spoke of the universe as being a manifestation of blind energy. Think of that put-down word, blind. And therefore we also speak of unconscious mental mechanisms. And the very word unconscious, as being the deeper aspect of our psyche, is a negative word and a put-down word. So as to say, what you are functioning as a rational ego with values and with a capacity to love is simply the epiphenomenon of a purely mechanical process. Too bad. So as a result of this so-called naturalism, we began to put up the most whopping fight against nature that was ever engaged in. And that fight is an expression of our fury and of our feeling of being left out. So that the technological experiment, which became possible as a result of the mechanical sciences, has largely been conducted in a spirit of rage. And the results are evident all around us. Here in Palm Springs, you are gradually getting all the smog from Los Angeles. This great cloud of poisonous gas put up by a city which is exemplary in this whole civilized world for fouling its own nest. Perhaps only Calcutta could be a bit worse. Some such terrible slum. But we have done it by technology, by ruthless beating about of nature without consideration for what the scientists would call our ecology. Ecology is that aspect of science which deals with the relationship between organisms and their environments. Ecology is the study of the balance of nature, of the way in which every living being depends upon innumerable other living beings of all species, and also upon inanimate forces, air, water, temperature, gases, vegetation, and all sorts of things. And this is one of the most important sciences that we can possibly study today. Because we are in a position where we realize that we cannot help interfering with the world. To be alive is to interfere. You must interfere. You cannot go back and say, hands off nature, let's leave it all alone. Because you're stuck with it, especially once you've started to interfere in a major way. We have so altered our environment that there is no hope for it but to go ahead. But we can, to some extent, change direction. But the only way that I can see of our effectively changing direction is through a transformation of the feeling that we have of our own existence and of what we mean by I. The reason for this is simply that all kinds of intelligent and even powerful people, like, say, Lawrence Rockefeller, who are interested in ecology and in conservation of our natural resources. They can scream their heads off, but nobody pays any attention. There is as yet, no really serious program at the government level to do anything radical about the pollution of water, the waste of water, the pollution of air, and the general ravaging of the United States of America. I'm amazed that congressmen can pass a bill imposing severe penalties on anyone who burns the American flag, whereas they are responsible for burning that for which the flag stands, the United States as a territory, as a people, and as a biological manifestation. That is an example of our perennial confusion of symbols with realities, which is, in a way, at the heart of the trouble, because what we think of as I is much more a symbol than it is a reality. The living organism, the whole mind-body, is much more than anything we mean by I. I largely stands for your personality, your role in life. And the very word person, as you probably know, comes from the Latin persona, a word originally used for the mask worn by actors in Greco-Roman drama, that through which sound comes because the mask had a megaphonic mouth to carry the voice in open-air theaters. So when you speak of being a real person, it really means being a genuine fake, because the personality is only the front. What is behind it? Well, of course, the organism is behind it. The whole organism. And we must be very careful not to confuse the organism with various symbols that we have for it, because those symbols can be extremely misleading. If we say the organism is the body, what we usually mean by the body is an impoverished meaning. When we speak of my body, that is to say my vehicle, my physical automobile, that is an unenriched meaning of the word body. Because what you really are as a body, as a living organism, is not some sort of separate existence coated by a skin which divides you from the rest of the world. Shakespeare has King John saying to Hubert, "Within this wall of flesh there is a soul, counts thee her creditor." Within this wall of flesh, the skin considered as a barrier, when actually, from a biological point of view, the human skin and all skins are osmotic membranes. You know, when you get something by osmosis, by sort of soaking it in, so in the same way one's skin is a spongy construction, full of holes, full of communicators, nerve ends. And your skin is simply a vibrating membrane through which the so-called external world flows into you and through you. So that you yourself actually are not so much an entity that moves around in an environment. You are much more like a whirlpool in a stream. And as you know, the whirlpool is constant only in its doing, that is to say, in its whirling. And you can recognize individual whirligigs in a stream. But the water is flowing through them all the time. They are never the same for a second. And so it is also with us. Or imagine it in another way. Supposing you have a rope, and 1 foot of the rope is made of hemp. 1 foot of it is made of cotton. 1 foot of it is made of silk. 1 foot of it is made of nylon, and so on. Now tie a simple knot in the rope. Now move the knot along the rope. And 1 minute it will be hemp, the next cotton, next silk, next nylon, and so on. Same knot. It will be recognizable as a continuing knot, as that knot, the knot in that rope. But the constitution of it will change as it moves. And so our constitution is changing constantly. Imagine, for example, a university. The student body, undergraduate, changes every 4 years. The faculty changes every so often. The buildings keep changing more and more. What constitutes the University of California? It certainly isn't the faculty, it isn't the students, it isn't the governors, it isn't the administration, it isn't the buildings. What is it? Why, a doing, a behavior, a universitying process of study and experiment and so on. So it is exactly the same with you. You flow. You are a process. But how do we draw the line about this process and its relationship to all other processes? We find that a very difficult thing to do the more you think about it. If you really felt with your whole organism, instead of just with that part of it called conscious attention, you would become aware of this flowing fact. And you would get a very strange feeling which at first might frighten you. It is possible, of course, to have this feeling. And the feeling is like this. You would not be quite sure how to interpret it. You might feel that you yourself were doing everything else that's happening. That would be one way of feeling it. The other way of feeling it would be that you are doing nothing at all, but that everything else is doing you. And you would feel completely passive, like a puppet on the end of strings. Although, on the other hand, if you got the feeling that you were doing it all, you would feel like God Almighty. It is very easy for our consciousness to slip into this state of sensation. It can happen spontaneously, like measles. It can happen by training, as when someone practices yoga. It can happen chemically, as when certain drugs are taken. And one has to be very careful about this feeling because it's enormously easy to misinterpret it. Either as being omnipotent, being God in the personal, literal sense, or as being helpless and merely driven. Now, what should be understood is that both these ways of feeling are right, only they must both be taken together. To be simultaneously omnipotent and helpless. These are two poles, opposite poles of one and the same state. Because the message that is coming through, and that we find difficulty in understanding because it's contrary to our common sense, contrary to our whole history and conditioning, the message that's coming through is you as a living organism and all that is going on in your environment constitute a single process. What in physics we would call a unified field. A single process, like a pattern, but you know, any pattern has all sorts of subsidiary wiggles in it. Like the organism itself is a unified pattern, but it's full of wiggles. All sorts of tubes and organs and bones and nerves and so on. Working in this way. You know, the body doesn't have a boss. We could pitch a big argument. Who is really the top dog in your body? Your stomach or your brain? I can argue for both ways. Well, let's first argue for the stomach. The stomach is fundamental. That's what eats, and eating is the fundamental thing of being alive. By putting food into the stomach, it digests it, and from there it goes out and energizes everything else. Obviously, the stomach is the most important. The hands, the mouth, the feet, all exist to serve the stomach. And naturally, as a final achievement of the stomach, is the brain, evolving later in the evolutionary process as a gadget up there to scavenge around and find stuff for the stomach to eat. That's the function of the brain. But now let's take the argument to the side of the brain. The brain says, oh, no, come now. Just because I arrived late doesn't mean that I'm unimportant. I was being gotten ready for. Because I am the thing that was the flower at the top of this thing. And this tube with stomachs in it and things below was preparing for me, and the stomach is my servant. It is doing all the dirty work, getting energy to put currents through my wonderful circuits, so that by the creation of all the goods of the mind, of the arts and sciences and religion and philosophy and so on, I shall be the true head of man. Well, both arguments are right. Because you have a relationship between stomach and brain, which is a sort of polarity. The one exists for the other. It's like when you prop up two sticks against each other. They will stand up so long as they lean on each other. Take one away and the other collapses. So chop off the head and the stomach is finished. Take out the stomach and the head is finished. So this is the way all organic life proceeds. It's different with mechanical life. Because the mechanism must invariably have a boss, the man who puts the machine together, the person who constructs the computer, who designs it, who asks it questions, who programs it. He is the boss. But organisms don't have bosses. They are essentially, I would say, democratic arrangements, where somehow in a marvelous way, an enormous company of cells are working together. But that isn't the way. The body wasn't sort of one day a lot of cells all crept together and said we're a body. That does sometimes happen in the biological domain. But much rather this, when you watch the gestation of a mammal, you see first of all a very simple little organism which swells. And as it swells, it becomes more and more complicated from within. No parts are added. Nothing is screwed on. There's no welding done or anything like that. It bulges. And of course it does absorb material, but it transforms it. But all of it works together at once, like the legs of a centipede. Like you work all together at once. For you see, when we come down to it, you think you decide things, but you don't know how you do it. How do you open and close your hand? You can decide, I will now open my hand and do it, but you don't know how it's done. And yet, in a sense, you do know how it's done, because I say, I know how to open my hand. But you don't know in words. You can't explain it. Still less can you explain how you see. Still less can you explain how you are conscious. How are you an ego? Well, you don't know. Because the springs of being conscious, of being an ego, are outside the surveillance of consciousness. They're somehow underneath. And that lets the cat out of the bag at once, because you see that what is I is something very, very much deeper than the superficial consciousness. And what you call I in the sense of the voluntary willing center, ego, has very little to do with it. You are just a watchman on top of the mast, or a radar on a ship that is scanning the environment by conscious attention, looking out for trouble, or looking for food. The real you is much too complicated to think about. Supposing when you woke up in the morning, you had to switch yourself on. That is to say, you had to, by an act of conscious attention, to go through your brain and turn on all the synapses necessary for wakeful life. It'd take you hours. Supposing you really had to be conscious of all the details involved in walking, or in breathing, or in circulation of the blood, you'd never get around to it. So you see, when we inspect the physical world with conscious attention, the first thing that strikes us is that the physical world is extraordinarily complicated. How can it possibly be organized? But actually, the physical world is not complicated at all. What is complicated is the task of trying to describe it in words, or of trying to figure it out in numbers. Because that is analogous to the task of, say, removing the water from the Pacific Ocean into the Atlantic with a beer mug. We can only take one mug at a time. And so we say in popular speech, you can only think of one thing at a time. That's not exactly true. But what it reveals is that thinking, that conscious thought, is a kind of calculus in which we understand things bit by bit. And it leads us into the superstition that things really are bits. Now, when you eat chicken, of course, you have to bite it, and you take it in bits. And to make it easier to bite, you order from the grocer a cut-up fryer. But you don't get cut-up fryers out of eggs. Because you see, although we can speak of a chicken, an egg, or a body, it is not actually a bit. It hasn't been bitten off, except for purposes of thinking. Now, this is beautifully brought out in a passage from Whitehead, which I will read to you. He's discussing the 19th century philosophy of science, which I was just discussing too. And he's saying in this philosophy, all our impressions of nature are simply products of our minds. Nature gets credit which should in truth be reserved for ourselves. The rose for its scent, the nightingale for his song, and the sun for his radiance. The poets are entirely mistaken. They should address their lyrics to themselves and should turn them into odes of self-congratulation on the excellency of the human mind. Nature is a dull affair, soundless, scentless, colorless, merely the hurrying of material endlessly, meaninglessly. However you disguise it, this is the practical outcome of the characteristic scientific philosophy which closed even the 17th century. In the first place, we must note its astounding efficiency as a system of concepts for the organization of scientific research. In this respect, it is fully worthy of the genius of the century which produced it. It has held its own as the guiding principle of scientific studies ever since. It is still reigning. Every university in the world organizes itself in accordance with it. No alternative system of organizing the pursuit of scientific truth has been suggested. It is not only reigning, but it is without a rival. And yet, it is quite unbelievable. This conception of the universe is surely framed in terms of high abstractions, and the paradox only arises because we have mistaken our abstractions for concrete realities. He calls that, you see, the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. The attribution, in other words, to our bitty way of thinking, to the world which we are biting. That is misplaced concreteness. The separations between things are abstract. They are concepts. In the same way, for example, as lines of latitude and longitude are concepts, even though a Russian poet has recently made a beautiful poem about the world being like a ball carried in a net bag. But you never expect to trip over the equator when you cross it. And although it is something quite abstract and does not exist in nature, it's extremely useful for purposes of navigation. So in the same way, bitting and having words to describe particular events or particular wiggles in the universal pattern are very useful. But they are very dangerous when you confuse things with natural events. Because then you get into this sort of trouble. The trouble of the sorcerer. The surgeon, who is too much of a specialist in one organ, runs into that organ and alters it and does what he considers a better mechanical job than the Lord did. But then he discovers, to his dismay and the even greater dismay of his patient, that the operation has unforeseen consequences in some other part of the organism because he didn't realize the connection. When likewise we object to certain insect pests. Oh, we say, get rid of them. DDT. And so, but then we found we got rid of something else we didn't want to get rid of.
And worse still, that this insect that we didn't like was doing a job for us in some manner of which we weren't aware, and we only become aware of it when suddenly we find ourselves covered with another kind of fly altogether, or with some sort of bacteria which this insect kept down. Watch it, watch it, watch it, because nature does not consist of separate things which you can just pull out like parts from an engine. Take the case of bees and flowers. Oh, we always use the bees and flowers to explain fundamental things about life. But we're going to go deeper than sex this time. Fascinating thing about bees and flowers is they're very different looking things. A flower sits still and blooms, and it smells, or stinks to be correct. The bee moves about and buzzes, but they're all one organism. You don't find flowers without bees. You don't find bees without flowers. They are just as much one as your head and your feet, which also look very different. So in that sense, you see, we are one with the incredible complexity of processes and wiggles upon which we depend. Although to say upon which we depend is not quite accurate, because that separates us from it as if I were hanging onto a beam and depending on it. It isn't like that. You don't depend on it because it depends on you. It's a mutual arrangement. And it isn't that one bit of this sort of came first, although that sometimes happens. But it's always there in potentiality, what came later. But it's rather in the same way that when a flower opens, you see all the different petals extending simultaneously, especially when you watch a fast motion movie of a flower opening. And so in the same way, there is a simultaneous arrival or evolution of the human organism. In other words, human beings could not have appeared on this planet until its temperature had lowered to a certain degree, until the atmosphere contained certain gases as a result of vegetative development. And then the environment became evolved enough for human beings to appear in it. Evolved enough, I'll say something further, intelligent enough for the appearance in it of intelligent beings. For your environment is intelligent. Otherwise you couldn't be. You see, as Jesus said, you don't gather figs off thistles or grapes from thorns. You won't get pears off an apple tree. So, you won't find people except on a people tree. And this planet, this solar system, this galaxy is peopling in exactly the same way that an apple tree apples. Put our existence into verb language as distinct from noun language, and you're much closer to the point. You see, nouns have the difficulty of designating things. Verbs designate process. Now, everything is a process, really. When we speak of housing for houses, matting for mats, we're getting there. The Nootka Indians have a language in which there are no nouns. And so they say, it houses, and then they add an adverb to show whether it houses religiously, homily, or marketingly. And so they see the world as the flow. What is it that houses? What is it that rains when we say it is raining? You see, we always have a funny idea that to get a verb, that is to say to get action, you have to have an agent. Now, this is the most ridiculous idea conceivable. How can a noun start a verb? How can a thing start an event? Because there's no action in a thing. Action can only come from action. Energy from energy. You can't get energy from a concept. Because nouns are all concepts. They're abstract, really. It's only verbs that are concrete. Because the world is process. Now, common sense insists that the pattern of the world must be made of something. Because we still think with Aristotle's common sense. Or with the imagery of the book of Genesis, where God made Adam out of the clay. In other words, he made a clay figurine and breathed breath into it, and it became alive. And so we constantly think that we are made of flesh, as if flesh was some sort of stuff like clay out of which you shape bodies, or like you make tables out of wood. Are trees made out of wood? What a ridiculous question. Trees are wood. They're not made of wood. And it's simply this artifact thing that gives us the idea of the world being made out of something. It isn't made out of anything. And so when physics tries to investigate what is the stuff of matter, they can't find any. Because you can never talk about anything except a process. You can describe what a process is doing. You can describe the structure, the nature of the dance, whether it's doing a waltz or a mazurka or the frog or whatever it is. And then you can describe that melody, shall we say, what it is performing. But there is nothing doing the performing at all. There is no stuff out of which it's being done, because when you examine stuff, you just find more pattern. See, what you mean by stuff is fuzz. When you look at something with a lens and you're out of focus, you see fuzz. But when you come into focus, you see structure. All right, now, the structure is made of all sorts of little lines and things. You can see them and you want to know what are they made of. So you turn up the magnification, and for a while you get a lot of fuzz, but when you're clear again, you see that those little lines are also made of... So, suddenly you feel rather insecure, because stuff has disappeared. There's a famous story about a physicist who understood this so well that he always went about in the most enormous padded shoes, because he was afraid of falling through the floor. Now look what's happened. Just look and see what has happened to us. If we go through everything that I've been saying, we find, first of all, that the thing that we thought was I is nothing more than a social institution. Just like the equator, or an inch. And to mistake it, to reify it, as Whitehead would say, is the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. It's strictly a hallucination. And any certain amount of psychological self-exploration shows this to be the case. Is a transactional interchange between the organism and the environment. It's not quite correct to say you're doing it and it's doing you. Because, see, Whitehead, in describing the scientific philosophy, saying, for example, that blue is entirely our projection on the sky, he's half right, you see. Those scientists he's talking about are half right. But the part of it that is left out of consideration is this. True, you, with your optical nerves and eyes, transform the sky into the blue feeling. But without the sky, you wouldn't have any optical nerves. It works both ways, you see. Without the air, whose density gives the blue effect. It's mutual. You do it, and it does you. But that's, as I said, a two-way, a clumsy way of talking about it's all one process, a unified process. And furthermore, from this process there has disappeared what we thought was solidity, what we thought was common sense, substance, and stuff. It's just pattern. And at once one feels sort of ghostly. as if you could be easily blown away. And that's why the Hindus call the universe the Maya, which means the illusion. Don't forget, illusion is related to the Latin word ludere, to play. So the play, the big act. It also means magic, as in a conjurer's creation of an illusion. It also means creative power. It also means art. And finally, it means the divine power. The Maya of the Lord. Lord is a bad translation of Bhagavan. Just the divine one. The Lord means boss in English. And the Hindus don't do it that way. But now you see, I've arranged this general introduction, which I'm afraid will be familiar to some of you who have attended my seminars before, but I've arranged this general introduction to raise the question, all right, if that's the way it is, how on earth are we going to arrange a transformation of man's consciousness so that he'll know it? Not just in theory, but something he feels in the same way as you feel what you take to be I at the present moment, confronting an external world. How will you transform that sensation? Because if you don't transform that sensation, you will not ever be fit to use technology. We shall continue to use our technology in a hostile spirit towards the external world, and we shall wreck the external world. We're busy doing it now. There is no necessity to abandon technology. We can't abandon it. But we can certainly use it in a different spirit. I have just been in the island of Ceylon, which is a garden. A beautiful, beautiful place. But it's completely undeveloped from a technical point of view. And it's in very bad economic circumstances because nobody wants to buy natural rubber anymore. It has no foreign exchange. It is very peaceful. But the change has got to come. So I discussed with one of the high members of the government the possibility that we could set up in Ceylon an experimental station which would serve not only India eventually and Africa, but us too. An institute of ecological technology where we could, in that experimental island, work out ways of production, of mechanization, automation, and so on, which would not ruin the island. And you have to do that sort of thing with a certain dedication, because one of the reasons why we make such a mess with technology is that the shareholders in any given corporation want to make a fast buck. Now, there's nothing wrong, you see, in wanting to be rich. There's nothing at all wrong in being rich. In fact, I think the world without rich people would be extraordinarily boring. The point is, you have to understand what riches are. And they are not money. Riches are land, clothes, food, houses, intelligence, energy, skill, iron, forests, gardens. Those are riches. But when you are concentrating, you see, only on making the buck, it doesn't occur to you that you're not really getting rich. You're just impoverishing yourself. It's like, when you up prices, the value of the dollar goes down, 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 down. You're just on a rat race, on a treadmill. The faster it moves, it doesn't get anywhere. It doesn't even stay in the same place. So it is that kind again. You see, this is another example of confusing the symbol with the reality of the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, as Whitehead calls it. So we shall devote the rest of the seminar to discussing the various ways in which it is proposed that we bring about or assist the bringing about of that change in our perception and conception of our own existence, so that we can feel ourselves the way we are, as distinct from the way in which we've been told to feel ourselves. This is the special thing about Buddhism. Everything in Buddhism sounds negative. Let's put it this way. Let's suppose you engage yourself in a relationship with the Buddha, or with one. I mean, there are hundreds of Buddhas. The one we call Gautama is just the historical Buddha that everybody knows about. But one Buddha leads to another, because as a result of his relationships with people, he turns them into Buddhas too, awakened people. Now you meet one of these people, and he's going to give you a rough time. But one of the Buddhas running around these days is Krishnamurti. And Krishnamurti absolutely destroys everybody's religion. Why do you believe this? Why are you hanging on to that? Why do you want to insist that this idea is so? See? And he shows you that all your fixed formulations, all the ideas to which you cling, are spurious. And Buddhism was one of the ways of doing just that. So one might say simply this, to try and sum up what Buddhism is about. The word Buddha is derived from the root Bud in Sanskrit, B-U-D-H, which means to be awake. So the Buddha is the awakened man, the man who woke up. What does he wake up from? Obviously a dream. And what kind of a dream is this? Well, I would call it a state of hypnosis. And this state of hypnosis, although I'm using hypnosis in a rather archaic sense of the word, is a state of being entranced, spellbound, fascinated, and this is called, in Sanskrit, avidya. A-V-I-D-Y-A. Vidya is knowledge in Sanskrit. And it is the root from which we get videre in Latin, to see, and so vision in English. So putting the A in front of it means non. Avidya, not seeing. Ignorance, ignorance, where you see but you ignore everything that you're not looking at. When you put the beak of a chicken on a white chalk line, and the chicken is fascinated with that and can't get away from the chalk line, that's avidya. So in the same way, our beaks were put on a chalk line when we were hypnotized into the notion of attending to life by conscious attention alone, by the spotlight to the exclusion of the floodlight. And so we began to imagine that we were separate individuals. What is called in Buddhism Sakhaya Drishti, the view of separateness. And a Buddha is one who has overcome that. He is awakened from that illusion, from that state of hypnosis, and he knows that well, I can't put what he knows in any positive terms. Buddhism has no doctrines at all that you have to believe in. I don't care what background you come from, whether you're a Roman Catholic or one extreme or a logical positive